how does that kind of violence threaten our everyday lives as workers? So we think about pro-doms, and the clients like seek out and pretend that the pro-doms are the ones that are in control, that have this power, there's this power exchange, but it so easily can flip.
I would love to know how you understand pain, both giving and receiving
A session is going to heal you from trauma. It's more that if you can take the trauma and see what grows from it, and see like if you want to poke around in it and see like what else can come out of it.
You said that the literature has changed over time. What are some of the like notable differences that you've seen?
What this idea of like healing is towards this idea of that exigent sadism is always going to be sort of a risk that one is taking. One was more of the pushing the edge of sadism, and that. Do you want me to describe?
Yeah, okay. I would love to hear the details and really sink the listeners into the scene. Welcome back to Uncensored, Tomie fans. Today's guest is someone I deeply admire, Yin Q. Yin is a mother, writer, filmmaker, and work activist, a former dominatrix, educator, and cultural force who has been a BDSM practitioner for over 30 years. She currently is a lead organizer with Reckonery Song and created Kinkout. They've spent decades exploring the power dynamics of bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, and sadomasochism, transforming that exploration into art, therapy, and activism. Yin is also the creator of the acclaimed web series Mercy Mistress, co-produced by Margaret, and a key voice bridging kink, queerness, and community healing. Yin, welcome to Uncensored. Thank you for coming on. We've known each other for like a few years at this point.
Yeah, I think this is, 2018?
I think it's probably like mid 2019.
Okay.
When I was like working with RCS.
Right.
Yeah. I think like you're one of the people that I've always looked up to in the industry, and I read your piece in Apogee when I was in college. So it was amazing, like meeting you, organizing with you, and then now, being friends and continuing to like be in each other's lives like this. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, I mean, I've really seen the work that you've been doing for many different fields, and then just saw you take off into the pro-dom role as well. I love watching your journey.
Hard.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what you've like publicly discussed in the past around how BDSM can reclaim childhood wounds. Can you share about how pain and power became part of your healing and what that journey has looked like?
Sure. I think that not all of it was like a conscious journey until much later. But when I was first really getting into S&M, which was really at the very get-go of awakening for me, I was never somebody who just wanted to, kiss lightly or, have these like long romantic walks, which were fine as well. But it was very vampiric for me. I've very much came in wanting the tussle, wanting the edge play, wanting the pushback, and also just even like the emotional the pushing of power play, although I didn't have the words for it just yet. And yet there was also a lot of shame around seeking out this type of violence within intimate relationships, while I was very, cognizant that this is something that I had seen in my childhood, that domestic violence was something that was really prevalent. And so my constant worry was that I was just doing something, that I was just replicating violence that I had seen as a child. And also I think that, dating myself too, I was coming out of like the second wave feminist generation, where I was really thinking about like violence against women. How do we, how am I replicating that, and how am I like continuing that, those systems within my own desires. So that was something that I was constantly examining as well. So to finally actually formally start playing within the leather lifestyle as well as the profession really gave me the rules, to be able to live by for myself. Consent being, of course, like the number one. Using safe words. Never thought about it before. I got into some very dangerous spaces, not thinking about safe words and negotiations before, playing in a packed party. So all of these things I feel like were these tools of learning even leather etiquette, protocols, safety, safe practices of like when you're actually spanking or when you're flogging, what to avoid, how to do things safely, how to tie safely.
Yeah, for people who don't know what a patch party is, what is that?
Oh, to like just go into a packed party. Of like a
Oh,
play
packed
part,
party.
like
Okay.
a play party. So going into play parties. Actually, it wasn't even like when I was younger, I wasn't even going into play parties that were necessarily S&M focused. It was more going to goth clubs and punk clubs and just trying to like seek out the person I thought was going to really push back, slap first and see if they slap me back, kind of play. So that's not okay in most relationships. So, for me to like actually formally be able to go into a play party where, oh, you learn about negotiations and such, that was really important to give me that path of healing of saying, okay, this is what I want. It's okay to want this. And this is the best way to practice it.
Yeah. I think everyone kind of goes on their own journey around discovering what they like and then finding the right container for it. Do you have any sort of examples of stories where you're learning about, this is violence and this is like negotiated violence, and figuring out those lines?
Sure. I mean, I think that a lot of the, you know, as I just mentioned, just getting into some relationships where that were just messy, a bit messy and possibly and definitely emotionally abusive, and then really learning like, oh, this is actually a power dynamic that I'm seeking, and if somebody else is seeking the same thing as a bottom, then this is okay if we're like consensually going into this relationship. But for me to just assume that over somebody is it's not a great way to be intimate with someone. And so I think that like some of the things that really fed me about the pro dom industry was the ability to actually seek out lots of different scenes and see like, what do I like, what don't I like. Role play was fun for me in the beginning. I'm not by nature somebody who loves to do a lot of role play in my lifestyle, especially now. But in the beginning, it was a lot of fun just so that I could see like I don't know, what is super exciting for me, what's titillating. I learned that I'm not somebody who is a great handler for leather pets, like for leather puppies or such. I was just curious, but being able to like be curious about that and like try it on and see if it works or not. I also learned that I'm not a leather mommy. Somebody had hired me for a session and wanted me to be there. I was actually a latex mom, and I tried it and realized like, no, you know what? This is really not for me. I do not want somebody suckling on my leather, on my latex tit. No, that's not interesting for me. But kudos for the people who love it. I'm
Yeah.
so glad for that.
There's so many different DOMs for different desires out
Yeah.
there. You've been a practitioner for over 30 years with so many different phases of that too. How has your relationship to power, dominance, and submission evolved over time?
I think it's constantly evolving, and I think it should for everybody, right? So when you're younger, or when I was younger, getting into the power play and power exchange was really exciting, but I was really coming at it from like a personal, point of view, and then being able to explore a little bit more through the industry itself. But then you really have to learn like what is what is it that's feeding all of the players in the scene. What is feeding the systems that are bringing us together with so that, because the personal is political, So what is it that I'm replicating within the sessions that I need to learn from and just, really dissect, because we need to dissect power to really be able to play with it in ways that are like very consciously fruitful and ways that we're going to continue to progress as spiritual, and intellectual human beings. Otherwise, it is going to be just a constant like rerun of a sitcom where it can get really tiring. It can get really also not only I think spiritually damaging, but it can get really boring as hell, right? If you're just going through the exact same fetishization, power play, even sadomasochism can get to that point where if you're not able to really use it in a way that's like unlocking something about yourself or the other person, or hopefully together, then it is, as I said, like it's a sitcom.
Yeah. I feel like I'm kind of going through that right now with I'm on my first ever hiatus from in person. And it's because I had this moment in session where I was like, oh, I feel that these like tendrils of boredom creeping in. And I think boredom is such a important data point because it means you're disconnected from a deeper level of meaning.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're people where when nothing's happening, we daydream, right? We're sleeping and our imagination fuels or like subconscious fuels nothingness. And so when that's happening, when there's something that's supposed to be exciting happening in front of you, that means something's shifting. Yeah. Has there been a moment like that for you in session where realize you're bored or like you realize you're checked out and that helped inform your domination shifts or how you negotiate power?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like something that I always, had suggested to novices who were learning from me, but also something I did regularly as a practice was like every 3 months, and I was an avid journaler for my sessions, but I would really like look at like what have I been doing? What am I starting to feel that boredom of, and where do I need to shift either my work or my play, or even just mix up the people who are around me, right? Whether it's to take on different clients, whether it's to let go of certain clients, and that's a really important thing to recognize too, And it's hard because when some people are like your bread and butter, but at the same time, these people no longer are feeding you intellectually. It can be a conundrum of like, do I continue to make money off of this? Or do I have the privilege to actually say I can like refresh and look after, look for other people to surround myself with?
Yeah. Have you ever had subs grow with you through those changes? Because those are my favorites where they're just kind of putty for me to mold as I go through different stages of my journey.
Yeah, I've actually have a few people whom I'm still friends with and I'm still keep in contact with, even if I don't do sessions with them. I've also had, plenty of subs who've changed me for sure. I think for the better of learning from them. I know somebody who, was a civil rights activist and really taught me a lot about social justice activism as well while being, doing sessions, and then like sort of the come down of like just talking together about what they were doing in the world, and hearing what kind of work they were doing. I have clients who have stayed with me as friends who have moved me deeply in their generosity to my life, as friends, as well as what they have to offer.
You are a heart sadist, and I would love to know how you understand pain, both giving and receiving on an emotional and spiritual level.
Yeah, so actually that has changed. I was a hard sadist. I was a pretty, like, and I used to advertise myself as a sadist when I was sort of at my peak in pro doming, and I loved it. It was something that I was seeking with blood play, edge play, extreme bondage, and then it got to a point, to be honest, where I was playing with so many hard masochists that the same thing as you were talking about in terms of boredom. Like when you start to feel like something is rote, and it wasn't necessarily that I was getting bored. It was more that sometimes I would dissociate, and after a while, if you're constantly seeking that edge of extreme sadism, you start to feel it creep in of, not of like, first of all, being emotionally drained, because to be able to hold that much pain is also to hold that much repair, right? Of like having to be sure that you're doing things safely. And then also, what are the emotional consequences of doing that every day? So I did pull back after a while. And I will say too that in my own life's journey, things have changed because my body's changed. My brain has changed. I now live with chronic arthritis. And so what I think of as pain and like how do I give pain is different. And it's not so to talk about, but the truth is that like when we think about disabilities too, especially invisibilized disabilities of people who are living with pain, then sadomasochism becomes a different game altogether. So even the idea of like now when I'm whipping somebody, I am going to hurt just as much as that other person is hurting, and maybe more so the next day. So I have to be really careful about like when do I want to expend this type of energy. And it's not that I don't love it still, but that I really use it in ways that are really precious to me now as opposed to in the past.
You've described BDSM as both art and therapy. When did you sort of realize this work could be a healing practice on top of the performance aspects of it?
I think that it's when I was actually undergoing a session as a client, as a bottom, with Mistress Cleo Dubois out in San Francisco, and seeking out a dom and asking them to put me through, certain rituals of endurance and of masochism, was able to like bring me to a cathartic state where I was able to like just tap into something that was beyond words, and was beyond talk therapy, and it was beyond any of the other therapy that I had been going through over and over again. So that it was just my body being able to accept the crave for pain. And I think that's something that was so enlightening to me. I'm, and now that I've just, constantly been looking at like this idea of like, what is it to heal? I think those words have also been changing within the not only the industry but also within the ideas of what sadomasochism does for oneself, and that brings about like this bodily, I don't know, absolution in some ways, but it's always so fleeting, right? So like I won't say that like a session is going to heal you from trauma. It's more that if you can take the trauma and see what grows from it, and see like if you want to poke around in it and see like what else can come out of it, whether it's conversation or whether it's just a bodily catharsis for a moment or an orgasm even, like those are things that like, great, these things come, sometimes they go. I can't say that I'm always feeling this confident about like where I am in my kink journey as well, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to say like I'm never fully at the full acceptance, because it is a wrestle with darkness. It is a wrestle with death. It is a wrestle with trauma, and that is never going to just lay still in my past. It's always going to come back as as PTSD, possibly as ghosts, possibly as stories, possibly as art, possibly as performance art, possibly and in conversation. But at least it becomes less scary.
Yeah, I think there's, like you said, there's a shifting narrative around healing in BDSM where there's no really like end goal where like, oh, now you're whole, right? It's always you're participating in some of those demons, and now you've like learned to dance with them in some ways, or like hold a wound together. in other ways. And it isn't linear, right? It's always this like spiral up or down, or oftentimes like a flat circle.
Right.
Yeah. What keeps you doing the work you are doing today now, even though you've stepped back from active sessions?
So the work that I'm doing with Kinkout, the I guess what drew me to it is because of my love of the art world as well, and of love creating spaces, creating gatherings together, bringing artists together for conversations, creating art myself and writing. Um, what I saw that was missing years ago was really just that there's so much about kink and leather that influences artists and you know artwork, and yet there weren't enough workers and actual leather lifestyle people within the museum spaces to actually speak about their own practice. So I wanted to go beyond that which was represented to the people who were actually living the life. And so that's what really compelled me to bring Kinkout together, as well as that we were constantly fundraising. So to be able to raise money for community activism was really important to me.
Hmm. And you studied literature and art even before stepping into the kink world. How do those early influences show up now?
Yeah, I think that it's great to be able to just constantly go back and I don't know, dip into the academic world, the art world, as scholars, and like talk to scholars about what they're thinking, because that has changed. The literature has changed, and I think there's this duality, right, of like what the cerebral is around then the lived experience, and I try to see like which one is informs each part of my life. And I don't know, I think that's been like a really great way to just continue that conversation, even when my body can't necessarily be doing the flogging every day.
Hmm. And you said that the literature has changed over time. What are some of the like notable differences that you've seen?
Yeah, I think that the language around healing has changed. I think there's some literature that we keep going back to, whether it's Foucault or Bataille, but I think that the literature like around Exigent Sadism by Abi Sagatobulu has
Hmm.
changed. What the what this idea of like healing is, towards this idea of that. Exigent sadism is always going to be sort of a risk that one is taking, to push edges, and that one must continue to push those edges to find that excitement of eroticism that
Hmm.
that Bataille speaks of.
And how do you sort of find that personal line between pushing the edges and actual cruelty? Like, how do we negotiate that, in your opinion?
I think that that's been less of my part of my life at this time. But I will say that during the time that I was playing on a more day-to-day basis, there was going into relationships that had a lot of what we used to call consensual non-consent. People who really wanted to push the boundaries of power exchange, of sadomasochism. I feel like that was a really exciting game to play, and it was a risky one, because you are, even as a professional, you are playing with people's emotions. And as well as we are being played as well, and I'm not gonna lie about that for sure I went through a lot of emotional, toll as well, with some of the clients that I had seen in that kind of situation. Um, I think there's a fine line. So I can't say that there's a distinction between cruelty that you play with in professional sadism as opposed to if you're playing, or I think that the difference is that you're in a setting of leather lifestyle as opposed to conducting power and cruelty over someone who has less privilege than you, less consensual responsibility.
And on the line of, sessions that can really take a toll on you or change you, has there ever been a session that broke you emotionally?
I think there was, yeah. I think there's two sessions that have brought me to a point of rupture, I'll say. Well, I don't know if it's like breaking emotionally, because there's always like a break and then repair. But one was more of the pushing the edge of sadism, and that. Do you want me to describe?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would love to hear the details and really
Yeah.
sink the listeners into the scene. I know where the whales are, and they're on I Want Clips. For over a decade, I Want Clips has been the home for big spenders and the top earners in fetish. I've been on the platform for years, and trust me, it delivers. I've had an amazing working relationship with I Want Clips. They flew me out to put me on a truck billboard. We had an amazing Christmas and Halloween shoot. And this is the platform if you want to make it in the fetish clip industry. Join today and use code MXTOMIE for 15% off your entire cart. And if you're an artist, you'll get a whopping 90% revenue share for your first 3 months.
Okay, sure. I don't know if I'm supposed to give trigger warnings in this, but so I think that like during the time when I was really, advertising myself as an extreme sadist, a client had come to me for a flaying of their and like a full flaying, and it's something that I had done small pieces of skin flaying in the past, but they wanted their entire shaft like completely flayed. And I dedicated myself to it and I got into it, but at some point close to the end, and he was very happy with the entire scene, but at some point at the very end, there was just so much blood that it did shock me. It got me to a point where I felt dizzy, I felt nauseous, and I realized I'm not going to do this again. This is not something that I want to put out in my life. I don't want to enter this space on a constant. I mean, I felt like, I was like, it was just a butchering scene. I just felt like there's just too much blood everywhere. And
Yeah.
I had scared myself.
Yeah.
So I pulled back. And then I think that something similar happened emotionally with a client whom I'm still friends with now, and we do talk about a scene once where I, took on the role of their mother, and in the scene we really pushed the edges of like where is this emotional sadism that they had lived through, and what was it for me to take on that role and speak to them in almost a conjured way, and I think that that's also a point where I looked at role play, conjuring, what it is to assume one's the role of the abusive person, and do shadow play with somebody, where it was something that it was too far along, that I didn't want to have to go into again. And luckily, we were able to talk about it, and both agree that this was something that we had gone, that was too much for both of us.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, when they think about dominatrixes, they fail to consider that we're also putting ourselves in oftentimes like a vulnerable position of enacting these things, and we're holding so much space and so much emotional energy at the same time. Yeah. In order to sink into a role play, you have to necessarily draw out something real from yourself in order to make it successful. It's almost like method acting in some manner. Was there something specific about that role play, something you said or did that really was like, pushing up against your own limits in that scene?
Yeah, I think it'll unlocked because we had both gone through similar childhoods. I think it'll unlocked a lot of feelings that I had had from my own, parental upbringing, and so it was something that it wasn't something terrible for me to enter and come back out of, but it was also a time when when we think about these dark, edgy scenes that seem like they're going to be just so satisfying to go into. I mean, and I would say this is not just even regarding emotionally challenging scenes, but I would also say this should be applied also to erotic fantasies too. Like erotic fun fantasies that sound like, oh my God, yes, this sounds like the most amazing thing, or this like incredible, whatever 5-person whipping scene sounds like an incredible thing. Sometimes it is great for those things to remain fantasies, and I think that that's the responsible thing of like learning when like, oh yeah, that could just remain a fantasy. Let me just leave that as a fantasy, and that's okay.
Yeah, I had a very similar blood surprise too. Also with like genitalia, where I did a crown of thorns on the tip of, and I think I like hit a capillary, and even if it's just one capillary, like it, there was so much blood, like it went through the top of the sheets, pooled to the second layer into like the mattress, and like yeah, there was a moment of like, there's something. You think you like something, and then you witness it, experience it, and you're like, oh, this is like new for me to go through. Yeah, that can, and then having to do aftercare, and oftentimes aftercare isn't just for a sub, it's also for the dom too, and having enough trust so that it can go both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is something about pain that you think only like quote a real sadist understands?
I don't think I have an answer for that. To be honest, I think that everybody understands pain in their own way.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that when you started out, it wasn't very you weren't as aware around the safety around sessioning, or like finding the right having the right protocols to approach clients or subs. What are some safety protocols now that for, near DOMs that they should know about?
Oh yeah, negotiations. Talk to someone first before you slap them. All right. Yeah, no, I mean, that seems like so common sense. But you're in high school. Sometimes you don't realize. Let's see. I mean, I think for all pro doms, they just say like, make sure you have somebody to talk to, that you have a close friend that you can come down, decompress with. Make sure you have community for sure, and make sure somebody always knows where you are. And those are like mostly tips for anybody who's in this industry. But even for submissives or people who are just really want to get into S&M and they're seeking, like, going into clubs. I mean, the same thing that you would say to anybody going to clubs and looking for a hookup is like, make sure your friends know where you are. Make sure that you're, as sober-ish as possible. And I have always said, to write down your interests, so you know what you're seeking intentionally, and then also write down what your boundaries are, because even if your boundaries change, and they do, they're constantly changing, then that they're changing, and it's not that you just all of a sudden are going from like what you think is your center to all the way to an extreme edge, without knowing that, oh, you are shifting, as well as just see like, who's causing that shift? Is it somebody else who's pushing you to do that shift, or are you shifting because your interests are actually changing?
Yeah.
And to catch yourself when you feel like you're going too far off the edge of like what you disagree with in terms of your own values.
You've worked with institutions like MoMA PS1, the Whitney. How do you bring worker and kink voices into spaces that traditionally excluded us?
Yeah, I think through a lot of guilt. I mean, it is about hacking the system of saying, these are spaces that have fed off of worker culture, or whether it's like artists representing or artists who get in, whether it's Maplethorpe who is out there, like who's the only it's like it's this white guy's photography, beautiful work that's brought like leather culture into museums, but then to bring the actual dominatrix or to bring the actual leather guy into the scene, why not? Why not bring them and uplift them in the institution too? Because there is so much beautiful artwork being made by people within the leather scene.
Mm-hmm. How do you guilt trip them?
I think just through that of like really indicating how these institutions have fed off of edge culture for so long, and yet but pander to the bougie.
Still happens today.
Yes.
Yeah. You've been recognized by Spike Lee as an impact activist. What does that acknowledgement mean to you personally and politically?
This was quite so many years ago, and so it was a shock. And it was amazing to meet Spike Lee and be, included in that tribute. I don't really think about it as much because it happened so many years ago, and like the actual work of organizing is just this very day-to-day, not glamorous, not rewarding. I'm not getting on any movies or like stages or awards anymore, but it's rewarding in its own way of that that I'm connected. I get to see the community that I help. I get to hear the stories from people of what it means to them to get mutual aid. So I can't say that award was hugely impactful to me in my work. It was just really lovely to be recognized by a filmmaker whom, of course, I adore. Like, he is such a pivotal person to admire in the work that he's done. But for myself, it's like day-to-day grant writing, day-to-day mutual aid, organizing, getting on the streets, handing out safety supplies. That's all just a what we do, and I think that's yeah.
Yeah. I think the important work is always the boring work, right? It's always the paperwork. It's a lot of conversations, flyering, going on Canva and being like, okay, which font are we using today to post on Instagram?
Knocking on politicians' doors. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yeah.
All of that. And I think that what feeds me though is are the people. Yeah, the people. And I always say this is dim sum as well, and to be able to like have share food with people, hear what's going on, and it can be burnout is very real, but also because I think that I've gone through some of similar situations of both getting arrested or facing state violence, then to be able to, on a constant basis, be able to help others who are facing it in even more extreme ways or at more proximity, that's your reward in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. How did the collaboration with Margaret Cho for Mercy Mistress come about? And what are some sort of conversations you had about representation and censorship as you were creating Mercy Mistress?
Yeah, Margaret Cho was such an icon for my entire youth. Just, seeing her stand-up comedy, some of her shows was so incredible. And also her coming out as, having been I had seen her at some kink parties as well. Mm-hmm. So I knew that she was in the scene. So she actually came on after production as an EP, and we had talked about just sort of how important it was to constantly have representation. And I should actually just remark that Mercy Mistress came out before Crazy Rich Asians, and so actually it was before. And Crazy Rich Asians was like the only the next big blockbuster movie after years and years of having nothing out there except, in terms of the Asian American representation, since like, I think it was like Joy Luck Club and then Crazy Rich Asians, and pretty much not very much in between except for things that were coming from Asia itself. So, and it was also before, we really saw this influx of BIPOC characters and diversity in Hollywood. So it was really, yeah, just being able to see an icon who's just been constantly pushing for breaking down stereotypes, and being able to then like have a conversation with her about it, and seeing like where we were wanted to like push it to the next level.
Yeah, I rewatched Mercy Mistress this morning to prepare for this interview. I want to ask, is the slave at the very last episode based off of a real client?
Yes. Yeah.
Because there was no more episodes after episode 10. I would love to know what happened at that dinner.
Yeah, so it was going to continue with, so for the continuation of, I had written or at least plotted out a full season. So it was going to continue with many different clients. Actually, each progression was actually going to show different clients, kind of get into their stories and how the clients then also brought out the Dom's life and interacted with her own journey as well. So this was about a particular client who had gotten was overstepping a lot of boundaries, and I will say it's like what became stalker. And so like how does that kind of violence threaten our everyday lives as workers? How do so we think about pro doms, and the clients like seek out and pretend that the pro doms are the ones that are in control, that have this power. There's this power exchange, but it so easily can flip. And because of the violence against women and also the misogyny and the instant ease that the clients feel to be able to flip that power whenever they want to, because of the threat of criminalization, because of the threat of being outed, the shame, the stigma that surrounds sex work altogether, makes it so easy for pro-doms still to be vulnerable to that kind of harassment and violence, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something that I wanted to show through the scene. Not only, I don't know if there was like a part where a dom is walking down the street and you see like the police lights going off, and that just happened to be in the street at the time that we were filming, but it was perfect because it was really showing that like how this woman who seemed like she's very much in control and has this great glamorous life and is doing this great work with one client can also be so easily then be so easily victimized by another client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the class divides within not just domination, but the broader work where like really privileged workers can, not only be faced out, but, like get on TV shows at this point, and the most marginalized feel, really in precarious situations. Like what are your thoughts on the broad class divides there?
Yeah, I think that it's about like really thinking, and I think about this all the time too, because I'm obviously speaking to you from a privileged position as well, of like, I feel supported to be able to be out, but at the same time, I understand then that I have responsibility then to play within my role of being out as a sex worker to be able to do the role of supporting those who cannot be. And I think that's really important for us not to take on the voice or like speak for other workers, but to constantly see like how can I provide platforms, how can I constantly be, or maybe it's just the fundraising of getting the money to those people who don't have that privilege, and organize with those who don't have the privilege of being out, and how can I protect them, but also, be sure that I can advocate for them as well.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to some more fun rapid fire questions now.
All right, let me prepare myself. I'm taking a sip of water.
Do you have a song right now that makes you feel instantly in your body, lifts your mood?
A song right now. Um, I feel like the song that the music that I always go back to is classical, just because that was my upbringing. So I will go back and say Mendelssohn's E minor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love. In the past, what was your pre-session ritual?
Um, so I used to always cycle down to my studios. Is something
Get a
about
little workout in?
yeah, something about cycling. Used to, like especially down the West Side Highway. We used to just kind of make me feel like I was like just getting into a mode of just kind of just like solo, I don't know, flying. And then whether it's lighting the candles, creating the space, to, gearing up, whether it was the latex or the leather, putting on the music, placing, lighting some incense, and then just really fondling the equipment, right? Whether it's like the leather equipment or the metal bondage. That was always very exciting because, yeah, I used to be a big gearhead for sure.
What was your favorite gear?
The head cage.
Uh-huh.
I loved head cages and hoods. Anything that went over the head and could like, basically bind the head. But the metal head cages I thought were always like the biggest mind fuck, because you could easily place the cage around someone's head and the rest of their body could be completely free. But if their head's bound and not going anywhere, it's truly, a mind fuck.
Yeah. The head really is like a fingerprint for the whole body. It does so much. What is one dominatrix misconception that we should just completely get rid of and has been consistent throughout the last 30 years?
I don't know. Is there a misconception? What would you say?
Well, a misconception. I think the misconception is like, and this might be a generation difference too, because right now, a lot of doms don't necessarily need to be in like leather and latex wear all the time to be dominant, and part of it is due to online censorship. Like, I had my first 3 Instagrams were taken down because our latex was being flagged. So I started wearing clothes more like this, but still sort of like hinting at domination or showing domination in other ways. So for me right now, like the misconception is like, you don't have to be a dom just because you're wearing leather and latex. You can be in gym gear, you can be in a hoodie, which I have done before.
Yeah.
I also think like workout gear has been really fetishized recently, just because traditional wear is kind of like for the generation above us in some ways. I think it's being brought into fashion in a different way now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, to be honest, when I first started, I don't know. This is not rapid fire, but when I was first started off in the industry, because I couldn't afford it, I was just using black dress and heels. So it wasn't, and it wasn't until, I was able to like really afford latex and leather that I was able to like become a fetishist in those ways. So yeah, I don't think that was a misconception for me. I don't know. Maybe the misconception is too that like all doms are like completely dominant throughout their entire
the 24/7 thing.
24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely like a
misconception.
fantasy headspace for a lot of subs, where they want to imagine that. But it's so much to be like that 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, it's a lot of Kool-Aid to drink when you're writing that like promo for yourself. And then like, I don't know.
What is your favorite New York City dungeon memory?
Actually, I know what it's a funny one is that I walked into Pandora's box as like, I think it was 17. Because I was in college and
2017, not when you were 17.
oh no, I was 17.
Oh, when you were
When I was
17.
years old. I walked into Pandora's box and they would not hire me.
For obvious reasons.
No, not because I was in
Oh, it's not because you're 17. Okay.
No,
Okay,
I
explain
had
more.
a fake ID.
Oh my God.
So they would not hire me because they already had an Asian.
Oh.
So it was all about tokenism at that time. So yeah, I was told that like that if the other dom was sick, then they would call me. But yeah.
Yeah. Wait, also, I didn't know that you started when you were in your teens.
I tried. I tried to, but then yeah, it wasn't until I left college that I could finally get the proper training.
Yeah.
I did work at a few spaces that weren't great
Hmm.
in the city.
What was your initial training?
Oh, the place, I mean, a place that I was actually properly trained was a place in Oakland called The Shadows, which was
Hmm.
like a beautiful, yeah, it was a beautiful dominatrix house to start off in.
Yeah, and what was that training like?
Um, just the getting flogging, whipping, spanking. I mean, everything, just being taught by the other women. It was like a sorority,
Hmm.
trying it out on each other. I mean, like, and then I don't know. I remember taking the floggers home and just being so excited and like setting up the pillows and like, flogging the pillows first and then like trying to get every friend who walked through my door if I could flog them, which was a San Francisco queer scene. So it was like, of course, plenty of people were ready to do that. But yeah, it was a fun time.
Yeah, I also started, as you know, in a dungeon Bushwick, and it did feel like a sorority where, all the were in one room talking to each other, and it was like we'll be called out for a session. And when we started, we had to like shadow for a certain amount of hours before we can take clients one on one, which I actually wish is more common for people starting off because that was really, really helpful for me.
Yeah,
Yeah, experiencing that and seeing how other people do it.
yeah.
Yeah. What is next for Yin Q, personally, professionally, creatively?
Well, currently, I am working on a production of a short documentary film called The Horse Feast, and this will be a film where we interview Kayan Dorashal from Glitz, Victoria Von Black from Trans Equity Consulting, Amalia Valentine from Decrim NY, and Lisa and Fran from Red Canary Song. And we are filming a dinner party that we are also producing and creating for them. And this is being supported by CSGS of NYU. So yeah, I'm really excited to make another short documentary and really give platform, as you are, to other people within the industry, of like what is their work, and also what are their communities going through at this time.
And where can people see that if they want to see that?
Well, hopefully we'll be posting it after production, probably in the spring of 2026. Through Red Canary Song as well as through Kinkout.
Okay, so check that out when it is out. Don't forget about it. Thank you so much for coming on, Yin.
Thank
So nice seeing you
you.
again.
Thank you, Tomie.
I know where the whales are. They're on I Want Clips. For over a decade, I Want Clips has been the home for big spenders and the top earners in fetish. I've been on the platform for years, and trust me, it delivers. Join today and use the code MXTOMI for 15% off your entire cart. And if you're an artist, you'll get 90% revenue share for your first 3 months. 90%. That is better than any other clip site platform out there. Thank you to I Want Clips for sponsoring this episode of Uncensored. Thanks for watching this episode of Uncensored with MX Tomie. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're a very good sub. And don't forget to follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon, and all the other apps that I'm on. I'll see you on the next one.